Reproductive System, Chapter 21. This presentation's a little different. The objectives are in the front of the presentation. They are not dispersed throughout. It was smoother to present one gender and then the other gender. The purpose of the reproductive system is producing offspring. In sexual reproduction, each, the male and the female, contribute half of the nuclear chromosomes needed to form the cell of the offspring. The advantage is that you have a mix of genes in each offspring, increasing the variability of the genetic characteristics of a population. The productive system of each parent produces the sex or reproductive cells called gametes. The gametes in the female is an ovum, and the gametes in a male is a sperm. There is a different kind of sexual reproduction. It's called asexual production. That is, one parent produces an offspring genetically identical to itself. It is what we used to call cloning. Let's talk about the commonalities between the two reproductive systems. The common general structure and function can be identical between the systems in both sexes. Systems adapt for development of sperm and ovum, followed by successful fertilization, develop, and birth of an offspring. Sex hormones in both genes is important in development of the secondary sexual characteristics and normal reproduction system activity. The production of sex hormones is required not only for development of the secondary sexual characteristics, but also for the normal reproduction functions in both sexes. We're going to start with the male productive system. And the male productive system has a standard plan. And the structural plan of this is that they're going to have essential organs for reproductions, which are the gonads, which is the testes, which produce sex cells, sperm, and spermatozoa. Associated sex of reproduction are the ducts. And ducts are passageway that carry sperm from testes to the exterior of the body. The urethra has a dual function. It serves as a passageway for both urine and sperm from the body. Sexual glands produce protective and nutritional solutions for the sperm. External genitalia is going to be covered as well. This shows a picture of the organization of the male reproductive organs. And I would take a real close look at where things are at so that it'll help you to process for when the test is there. We're going to start with the testes. The testes, the structure and the location, testes descend into the scrotal sac right after birth. The reason that they're in that sac is because they need to not get too warm, because if the scrotum gets too warm, the testes have a decrease in sperm production. They will, if a man has a problem with producing a child or sperm count, they will tell him to wear loose-fitting pants so that the scrotum can get air and be cool. The testes are covered by tunica albicina, and it is tough and whitish. Now these are located inside that scrotum, so we're talking about the harder part inside of that scrotum. They're small, egg-shaped, and firm. And the tunica albicina is what divides the two lobes containing the seminiferous tubules. The interstitial cells within the testes produce testosterone, and the testosterone will affect patients that have prostate cancer. And one of the things that they will do if a patient has prostate cancer is they will do an oophorectomy, which removes the testes completely. The problem is that that person is no longer able to produce a sperm and will have problems with function of the penis. This also could be done for other reasons. Back long time ago, they used to do that for men who were pedophiles. This is a picture of the ducts and tubes that are engaged. They're really exaggerated in size so that we can take a real close look at them. You will see that there is the white lining of the testes and the epididymis around it, and the vas deferens, which you'll find are real important for transporting the sperm out of the body. The function of the testes. The purpose is that they're going to be able to perform a process called spermatogenesis, and it's a process of sperm production. The sperm precursor cells, called spermatogonia, meiose into primary spermatocytes. This spermatocyte has 23 chromosomes and 4 spermatids, and it takes place in the epiphtheous tubules, which are in the epididymis. On the previous slide, we talked about the creation of spermatozoa in spermogenesis. And what the protozoa looks like is it's a highly specific cells, and it's got a head and a tail, and the head contains the genetic material. It has an acrosome containing enzyme that assists in the sperm penetrating the outer layer of the ovum, and inside between the tail and the head, the latter part, is the mitochondria, which helps to provide the energy that the sperm will need to get to the ovum. The testes do more than just produce sperm. They also produce testosterone. And the testosterone masculinizes the individual and promotes development of male accessory organs. It also, testes promote and maintain the development of male accessory organs, stimulate protein anabolism, and develop of muscle strength. And the testes, we need to note that they produce semen, sperm, and seminal fluid. Spermatogenesis. When we talk about spermatogenesis, look at the picture up here and where it starts out with just a very small organism, and it progresses to what we see down at the bottom, which is your sperm cells. Over the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about these particular parts, which are called the productive ducts. The vas deferens, ductus deferens, the ejector duct and urethra, and the epididymis. Vas deferens, or ductus deferens. They are thick, smooth, and very muscular tubules that receive sperm from the epididymis and transfers it to the scrotal sac through the abdominal cavity, When it does, it passes through the inguinal canal. It joins the duct of the seminal vesicles to form the ejector duct. It extends over the top and down the posterior surface of the bladder to the ejector duct. And if you hear of somebody having a vasectomy to promote sterility, this is what they do. They cut that or burn that. And so the sperm cannot be ejaculated. The vas deferens join the duct to form the semivesicles to form the ejector duct. The ejector duct permits the sperm and semen to empty into the urethra. This is the sperm goes through ducts that it passes through to before exiting the testes until it meets the exit of the body. So the vas deferens deliver it to the epididymis, and the epididymis is a single coiled tube about 6 millimeters in length. It lies along the top and behind the testes in the scrotum. It contains sperm. Sperm normally develops in the epididymis, and it can be there as long as 3 weeks. We're going to talk about the accessory organs, and these are classified as accessory organs. The semen, the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and the Cowper gland. We will be discussing these further over the next couple of slides. Continuing with accessory glands, we're going to start with semen, and this is not the ones out in the ocean that run boats. The semen are a mixture of sperm and secretions of the accessory organs. The average ejaculation is 3 to 5 milliliters. It contains 100 million sperm. The semen protects the sperm from the acidic environment of the female reproductive gland. The seminal vessels produce their pouch-like sacs that produce about 60% of the seminal fluid. This seminal fluid is a thick yellowish, and it's rich in fructose to provide energy for the sperm so the sperm can have good mobility. Another accessory organ is the prostate gland. It's shaped like a donut, and it's located below the bladder. And it surrounds the urethra. And it secretes about 30% of the seminal fluid volume. And it's what makes the thick and milky colored. It adds to the alkaline secretion to the semen. It activates semen and is needed for the ongoing sperm mobility. It also, in older gentlemen, will become enlarged and block off the urethra. So in older gentlemen, they need to do sometimes surgery to help correct that. Another accessory organ is the bulbous gland, and it's so much easier to say Cowper. It resembles a pea in size and shape. It secretes a mucus fluid that consists of approximately 5% of the seminal fluid volume. And I would take special note of these percents because you're going to see them again. This fluid that is produced neutralizes any residue of sperm damaging acidic urine in the urethra. It lubricates the urethra to protect the sperm from friction damage. It adds to the external lubrication of the penis needed for intercourse. Now let's talk about the external genitalia. The external genitalia is the penis and the scrotum, and it's called genitalia. The penis has 3 columns of erectile tissue, 2 dorsal columns called corpus cavernosa, and 1 ventral column surrounding the urethra called the corpus spongiosum. The glans penis is covered by foreskin, and that foreskin is sometimes surgically removed, and that surgery is called a circumcision. Circumcisions are elective and performed at the discretion of a parent, and it's totally elective procedure. Now that we've covered the external organs of the male, let's talk about the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system has a structural plan. The organs are classified as essential or accessory. The essential organs are the gonads and the ovaries, which produce the sex cells or ova. The associated organs are the ducts or modified ducts. This includes the oviducts, the uterus, and the vagina, and the sexual glands, which include the breast, and then the external genitalia. So the ducts, the sex glands, and the external genitalia are the accessory organs. There's a couple things to note here. You probably won't see on a test, but it's something that is good to have in your brain. This looks a little like the testes, and when they do surgery on a female for sterility, this is where they're cut, right there, just like they do for the vas deferens. We're going to have quite a conversation about ovaries, and ovaries are essential organs, and they produce the ovum. Structural location: they're a pair of glands about 3 grams each, and they resemble a large almond. They are attached to ligaments in the pelvic cavity on each side of the uterus. So you have 2 ovaries. We'll look at the microscopic structure of the ovaries. The ovary follicles contain an oocyte, and the oocyte are immature sex cells, and you have about 1 million at birth. The primary follicles, which is about 400,000 at puberty, are covered with granulosous cells. About 350 to 500 mature follicles, often called graphene follicles, ovulate during the reproductive lifetime of most women. The graphene protects the oocyte. In secondary follicles have a hollow characteristic called an antrium. The corpus luteum forms after ovulation, and it is developed by LH. And every time you see LH, that's that luteinizing hormone. This is a microscopic view of an ovary, and this is the process of creating an ovum. And here is where ovulation happens, and here's your corpus luteum. Okay. Well, what's the function of the ovaries? Well, oogenesis. Oogenesis is the process where meiotic cells divide, producing daughter cells with equal chromosome numbers but unequal cytoplasm. The ovum is large, and it has polar bodies that are small and degenerate. Ovaries also are part of the production of estrogen and progesterone. The granulose cells surrounding the oocyte and the mature and growing follicle produces the estrogen, and the corpus luteum produces the progesterone. The progesterone usually is there out of the corpus luteum for 11 days after ovulation. The estrogen causes the development and maintenance of secondary sexual characteristics, and progesterone stimulates secretion activity of the uterine epithelium and assists estrogen in initiating menses. And estrogen is what they give to gentlemen who are having a sex change into females. Over the next few slides, we're going to go over the accessory organs. These are grouped into three categories. The reproductive ducts, which are the uterine fallopian tubes, or oviducts, uterus, and a vagina. Two of the accessory glands, which are the vestibule and the breast. The third group we will look into is the external sexual genital, which is your vulva and perineum. Reproductive ducts. We're going to start with the uterine tubes, frequently called fallopian tubes or oviducts. They extend from about 10 centimeters from the uterus into the abdominal cavity. They have an expanded distal end that's surrounded by fimbriae. Now take note of these fimbriae. The fimbriae produce a current to bring the ovum from the ovary to the fallopian tubes. So the fallopian tube does not attach to the ovary. So there's a little space in between there. The fallopian tubes have a mucosal lining that is directly and continuous with the abdominal cavity. Its purpose is it passes the ovum from the ovary to the uterus, and this is where fertilization happens. The uterus is part of the productive ducts, and the uterus is composed of three parts: the body, the fundus, and the cervix. It lies in the pelvic cavity just behind the urinary bladder. The three parts of the uterus are the body, which is the central part of the uterus. The fundus is the upper round portion of the uterus between the fallopian tubes. It is what we feel when we are working with pregnant ladies. That's what you feel is the fundus. The cervix is the portion that dilates during labor. Within the outer layer of the uterus is a myometrium, which is a muscular layer. It allows the uterus to contract during labor. Then there's the endometrium. The endometrium is lost in menstruation, and the changes in the uterine lining repeat themselves and are spoken of as the menstrual cycle. Another duct is the vagina. The vagina is a dispensable tube about 10 centimeters long. It's located between the urinary bladder and the rectum in the pelvis. Provides penile penetration during sexual intercourse and is the birth canal for normal delivery of a baby at the end of the term of pregnancy. Remember that the vagina is an accessory or secondary sexual gland. See this little space between the ovary and the fallopian tube, and see why there has to be some sort of current to get the ovum into the fallopian tubes. Accessory glands. The vestibular gland, you will usually hear this called the Bartholin gland. It secretes mucus lubricating fluid that is for the vagina opening, and the ducts open between the labia minora. Breasts. Breasts are located over the pectoral muscles of the thorax. The size is not related to milk production. The size is related to fat quantity. The lactiferous duct drains at the nipple, which is the nipple is surrounded by a pigment called the areola or rela, depending on which instructor you have, that is around the nipple. The lymphatic drainage, the reason you need to know about it, and it's important because it will precipitate spread of breast cancer to other parts of the body. And the alveola is responsible for milk production. I want you to take a really close look at these two words and be able to differentiate, because if you can't differentiate the two of them, you're going to run into a lot of problem on the test. The external organs, the vulva, which has several structures, which include the mons pubis, the clitoris, the external urinary meatus, the labia minora, and the hymen. And the hymen is a membrane that can partially close the vaginal orifice. Now this is a continuation of the external genitalia. And so when we talk about what we have here, match it with the previous slide. The vestibule is the place between the labia minora. There's, in that area is an open for the vestibular ducts. Remember the Bartholin glands? Their ducts go into this area. There is the orifice, or the opening of the vagina. The labia majora. Now the difference between the labia majora and the labia minora is the majora is the bigger fold and the minora is the littler one. Then there is the urethra meatus, and you need to know that the urethra meatus is between the clitoris and the vaginal opening. And the Bartholin gland ducts, which I just mentioned up above. Another part of the external genitalia is the perineum. Now the perineum is located between the vaginal opening and the anus or rectum. It's what's surgically cut during childbirth. It is called an episiotomy, and it opens up the vagina to help the baby come out. Let's walk through the external genitalia of the female. So the mons pubis is up here with the hair, that bump right here. The labia majora, that's this part that's out here. Okay. The clitoris is right here. And there is a foreskin over the top of the clitoris. In some cultures that is removed. The labia minora, which is your inner folds here. Okay. And the vestibule, see the vestibule goes all the way through here. So when we talk about the vestibule, this is what we're talking about. This whole section right here. This is where your Bartholin gland is, and see how it comes out right about here. Okay. This is the orifice of the vagina, and this is a hymen that can partially cover this opening. This is your perineum. This is what I said you might see surgically opened to let the baby out. Menstrual cycle, and I want to stress cycle, okay? Involves many changes within the uterus, ovaries, vagina, and the breast. The cycle is about every 28 days. It varies from month, varies from individual, and it might not be the same in an individual. So you may have it menstrual cycle that's 28 days this month and 29 next and 27 the the month after that, so it varies. But when we talk about it medically, we stick with these 28 days. Okay, the first menstrual flow is referred to as menarche. And then when the menstrual cycles stop, it's called menopause. And it's usually between the ages of 45 and 50. And know that this is an average. There are some that they're older than that, some that are younger. The menstrual cycle starts with menses. Now, menses lasts between 4 and 5 days of a cycle. Remember that. Might vary, but this is what you will find for medical answers. It's characterized by the sloughing of bits of the endometrium lining, and that is where you would bleed for menses. Proliferative phase. The proliferative phase is the days between the end of menses and the secretory phase. Now, it begins after the menses flow and ends and lasts until the ovulation. It happens about 9 days into the 28 days. The proliferative phase also varies in length. The shorter the cycle, the shorter the proliferative phase. The longer the cycle, the longer the proliferative phase. Know that progesterone is in control of the lining of the uterus, and the endometrium is preparing for ovulation and fertilization during the proliferative phase. The proliferative phase prepared the uterus for the ovum. And so when ovulation happens, this typically occurs 14 days before the next menses begins. In a typical 28-day cycle, ovulation occurs around day 14. In a 30-day cycle, ovulation occurs around day 16. Timing of ovulation has great practical importance because the possibility of fertilization. A woman's fertilization period is typically 3 to 5 days before and no later than 24 hours after ovulation. Most sperm retain their fertilization power for about 24 to 74 hours after being deposited into the female reproductive tract. Now, knowing medicine, isn't it amazing that we don't have a whole lot more babies? A woman's fertilization period only lasts a few days each month. Menopause occurs when ovulation structures cease to function. The secretory phase. It immediately precedes the menstruation. It's the days between ovulation and the beginning of the next menses. Secretory about 14 days before the next menses. Characterized by further thickening of the endometrium and secretion by its glands in preparation for the implant of the fertilized ovum. So it's getting the uterus all ready for this baby. It's a combined action caused by the anterior pituitary hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and that's the FSH, and the LH, which is your luteinizing hormone, which cause ovulation. Now, I want you to take special note because you're going to see FSH and you're going to see LH. So know that what they are. The follicle stimulating hormone begins the maturation, and note this word, maturation, of the ovarian follicles. A sudden sharp decrease in estrogens and progesterone bring on the menstrual cycle if the pregnancy did not occur. This is a diagram of the menstrual cycle. And note these days, okay, because you're going to need them. This diagram illustrates the relationship of the pituitary, the ovulation, uterine functions throughout the typical 28-day cycle. This is how the menstrual cycle is controlled. The secretion of the gonadotropin-releasing hormone stimulates the secretion of the follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary gland. Ovulation occurs because of the combination action of the two anterior pituitary hormones. Birth control pills, on the other hand, they contain estrogen substance, which suppresses the follicle-stimulating hormone. And with a low follicle-stimulating hormone, no follicles start to grow, and therefore none become ripe enough for ovulation. Summary of the reproductive system. The reproductive system in both sexes revolve around the production of reproductive cells, which are called gametes. Production of sex hormones is required for development of sexual characteristics and the normal reproduction function in both sexes. Both men and women have similar structures to accomplish complementary functions. This is a table that compares the two reproductive systems. And I'm sure you can look at it and read it, but note how they are pretty similar. Make sure to post any questions that you might have.